elect you that time. I call this meeting of the Madison School Board to order. Ms. Humphries, can you please call the roll?
President Thompson,
Present.
Vice President Causey,
Here.
Member Hunt,
Here.
Member Holcomb.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Gresham is on her way from a track meet that she is coaching, so she will be here shortly. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Holcomb, seconded by Mr. Hunt. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Hunt, would you like to lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Next, I don't believe we have any need to call executive session. Hearing none, next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Guerin.
President Thompson, members of the cabinet, and guests, it's hard to believe that the first quarter has come to a close. I hope everyone had a wonderful, restful fall break. I am excited to share that our very own board president, Christine Thompson, was named the 2025 Jack Jewett Award winner. The award, given by the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flynn Foundation, recognizes a Flynn Brown Fellow who exemplifies Jack Jewett's leadership approach through high ethical standards, public service, and a commitment to civil discourse. This is quite the award accomplishment and so well deserved. Congratulations, President Thompson. It is almost time for Discover Madison. Discover Madison Kindergarten is Friday, November 7th from 8:30 to 12 p.m. It is for families interested in learning about our elementary school programs at Madison Camel View, Heights, Rose Lane, Simus, and MTA. The tour is geared toward new families with students entering kindergarten next fall who want to really get the flavor of each campus. And this will be our second year for Discover Madison Middle School, which will be Friday, November 14th from 8:30 to 12. It will tour number 1 Middle School, Meadows, Park, and MTA. And again, it's also geared toward families who are entering 5th grade next fall who would like to learn more about our middle school programming. And I want to thank our board members. Some of you serve as tour guides and do an excellent job. And also thank you for the communications department. I know that takes a lot of work to put on. Those spots do fill up fast. We always have wait lists, so please check out the website for that information. I want to thank all those that attended our Interfaith Lunch meeting on Monday. The Interfaith is made up of faith-based organizations with Madison that came together to share information as a group and explore opportunities for Madison to support their congregations and for them to help support our students and staff. If you're interested in attending it in the spring, please let us know. Don't hesitate to call myself or Danielle. Madison High School Night is tomorrow night at the Madison Center for the Arts lobby. If you've never been to high school night, it is really something to see. 8th graders and their families can explore all the high school options for them after promoting from Madison. I also want to congratulate all the teachers that won APS teacher grants. We had 11 teachers from Rose Lane, MTA, Meadows, and Simus, and our own former board member, Sarah Spear, was there to hand out some of the awards, which was very exciting. Thanks to APS for supplying those classroom grants. Lastly, parent-teacher conferences are coming up. The year is flying by. They are scheduled for October 22nd through the 24th. Please check in with your school's website or Parent Square for more information on that.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. Let's start with Mr. Holcomb today.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I also had an opportunity to go to the interfaith lunch. It's always good to have that connection with the faith-based communities in our community, and we're serving the same families and that, and working together. It'd like to be nice if we could get some more participation. So if anyone out there who's listening, if your church or synagogue or temple at all, please, we do want to interact and work together to serve our community. And other than that, on personal note, this weekend I got to sing in a barbershop competition, and the chorus I sing in, we qualified to go to the international competition, and so. Singing what you wouldn't traditionally consider barbershop. I saw the light from the animated movie Tangled, and Somebody Loved by Queen, and it was an event. That's all I have.
Ms. Cossey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Guerin, I'm so glad that you recognized Christine.
Yeah.
It is just a really huge award. In fact, I had written my notes. You said it so much better than I would have, though, so thank you for that. But I just really, the work that you do beyond this board is truly inspiring, and I am humbled to be on this board with you many times, Christine, or Ms. Thompson, so thank you again. And recognition is a big deal. I wanted just underscore that I really feel that our Discover Madison tours are like nothing else. I don't know any other tours where you can bring your kindergartner and they can get a chance to see what it looks like in kindergarten. I know when my first child was getting ready for kindergarten, I was a typical parent mom, and I visited so many campuses, but I didn't take my kid because they weren't necessarily invited. So I just want to underscore that this is a really unique opportunity for your kid to see with their own eyes and provide to you feedback on what they think feels right for them. It really is a unique opportunity, and I'm honored to serve as a tour guide for that particular, for the kindergarten tours. Also, just want to welcome back everybody for second quarter. I cannot believe how fast first quarter flew by, although it is finally cooling down, so it kind of feels like it actually is second quarter, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt.
Yes, congratulations to Ms. Thompson. Well-deserved award, quite notable, the company among which you were competing, and congratulations for that recognition. Welcome back from fall break. I hope everybody was able to get a bit of a reset, get a bit of time to sleep in a little bit and rest up. We have the OM teams coming together at the different schools, and as we do that, I want to just recognize the coaches and the folks that put in a bunch of extra time to put time into those children. We are often quite competitive at that coming out of Madison, and so thanks to the teachers. Odyssey of the Mind. Sorry, OM. Yeah. Odyssey of the Mind. But thanks to the coaches that put a lot of time outside the classroom into that. And then finally, just want to say good luck as we go here into the second quarter. It was really, actually, final thing I do want to say is we had all these storms, and when I talked to Dr. Guerin, I was like, any problems? Do we have any leaks? And to my understanding, no. So to the facilities team, incredible work building great buildings and being prepared for what was a really remarkable time in terms of disaster response, but we were fine. So that's a great thing to not have to respond to something. So great work to the facilities team.
Thank you. Ms. Gresham, how was the track meet?
Hello. It was good. Pardon my tardiness and my attire. Yes, we had our cross-country meet. We got one more. Finals is next week. So hope everyone had a great fall break. I had some very tired kids at practice Monday morning. So hopefully that means they had a lot of fun. I think that's it. We had a great interfaith breakfast. I want to emphasize that it's all faiths, so please, we would love to have all faiths. That would be great. Looking forward to the tours. So thank you.
I just want to echo the comments made. I'm really excited about both of the tours, both the kindergarten tours and the middle school tours. I think each time families tour all the schools at once. I remember there was a parent last year who said, wow, we were pretty sure we were going to send our daughter to kindergarten, but I think she's made a different choice, and I don't. All of them are great. So I think it gives really everyone a great perspective on everything Madison has to offer, both at the elementary level and in the middle school classes as well. Want to congratulate all those students who probably here in the next week or two are going to be getting their quarterly awards on their campuses. I know that's coming up, and also getting ready for parent-teacher conferences, thanks to all those PTOs who are helping support lunches and dinners for teachers as they're going to be having some long days at school. So thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there is no items to be taken off the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Kazi, seconded by Mr. Hunt. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is call to the public. Pursuant to board policy, time has been set aside for a call to the public. This is an opportunity for individuals to address the entire board in a public setting to express their views or concerns. State law limits our ability to respond to comments made during call to the public. However, we do hear remarks and ask the superintendent to follow up and to provide us with information regarding any issues raised. To keep us on schedule, each speaker has no more than 3 minutes to speak. Ms. Humphries, I understand there were no online calls to the public. Are there any present here today?
We do not have any calls to the public.
With no calls to the public, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Information item, statewide demographic study. Dr. Guerin.
President Thompson, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Scott Thompson to introduce the next item.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin and board members. This evening, I've asked Rick to come and share with you a presentation that I saw this summer at the ASBO conference. Rick has been in front of you as before, so some of you are familiar. If you're not, he's been doing demographics for schools for quite some time. He and I worked together back in the day when Dysart District went from 5,000 kids to 25,000 kids. And we were there for all of it, so it was kind of an exciting time as far as demographics were concerned. But he's kind of got a different challenge in front of him as he does the work nowadays, and he's going to share kind of the overview of what's going on nationally and statewide, and that will kind of put in the context of a later presentation that we'll have in December looking at our own data. So this evening, no Madison-specific data, just kind of an overview of what's going on to put in context the information you're going to get later. I'll turn it over to you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Scott. President Thompson, Vice President Kazai, Dr. Gruen, it's my pleasure to be here this evening. As Scott intimated, this isn't about you. This is about the big picture, and it's become really important for boards to understand that it's not you. For the most part, that everyone is in this is experiencing the same sort of phenomenon, and it's being driven by the same factors. What's interesting to me is that different factors are more and less important in different districts. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I go through this, but as a reference. But as we said, we're going to talk about the big picture stuff tonight. So we're going to talk about state and local or state and national demographic trends, population growth, particularly the aging of the population, housing market conditions, something that I've had to start taking, kind of a even deeper dive into as I look at where districts are going in the future. And it's not only just, the value of the units, it's the age of the occupants, and it's owner versus renter. And we see all kinds of shifts in that going on right now that are really impacting our demographics. And then, of course, in Arizona, we talk about school enrollment, and we can't do that without talking about choice. So we're going to look at the big picture enrollment trends. We're going to look at some of the enrollment in the alternative providers, and remind you, I guess, because I know you already know, how difficult that makes what Scott and I do, which is trying to predict the future. It probably isn't as difficult though as the 1 year in Dysart There was 7,600 housing units built in 1 year. Opened 2 elementary schools and filled half a high school in 1 year. It was truly, it was really incredible experience out there, I got to tell you what. So we'll start with the biggest picture stuff, U.S. population. So as the chart shows, the blue bars, the total population of the United States is continuing to grow, however, at a much, much slower rate than it certainly did back in the 90s. This data is the most current available. I have seen some recent data that suggests that the population of the United States may have fallen in 2025. So we'll see if they get around to revising these numbers or not, but it's not the direction we'd like to see it go. And I always talk about it in terms of, in terms of economics. It's easy to adapt to change when the pie is getting bigger. It's very difficult to adapt to change when the pie starts to shrink. And that's unfortunately where we all are, because the red line on top of this chart is keyed to the right axis, which shows the percent of that population that's under 18. And you can see that it's falling. What you can't see from looking at this directly is that it's been 75 million since 2010, and they're not projecting it to increase at all through 2050. Those two bars completely offset each other. And as a nation, we're sitting at 75 million-ish persons under 18 for the foreseeable future. It doesn't mean there's not going to be growth in Arizona and losses other places, but at the end of the day, again, the pot isn't getting larger. In Arizona, of course, we still do have population growth and some fairly substantial growth these days, led by, I might add, a complete change in who we are as an economy since I've lived in Arizona. I came in 1986, and it was about customer service centers and, building houses. That was pretty much all it was about. And now, in the last 10 years in particular, the extreme growth in manufacturing and in distribution, because we're a distribution center now. But the really impressive part is the manufacturing part and the medical technology part that has come to our community that has, for better or for worse, taken us to the next level. And I say for worse because we got the prices that came with all of those jobs too. And one of the things that people that live here are battling is that the people who are moving here to take a lot of the brand new jobs make a lot more than the people who lived here before. So it's really having a double whammy kind of an impact, on the local residents. Now, I'm thrilled that my house is appreciated so much. I also can't afford to live anywhere else, so I can't sell it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I think we're all feeling that. But in any case, the state is still projecting more growth. The most likely scenario, which is the medium series, shows us getting to about 10 million people by 2050. So certainly not a doubling of the population like we saw between 1990 and 2020, but still some pretty substantial growth in total population during that period. This is where it gets sticky, is when you start looking at the population under 18 in the state of Arizona. And so what happened is you can see that from 1990 through 2010, essentially the share of the population under 18 was fairly stable. In fact, it bounced up at 95, but it stayed at a fairly high level. And then starting in 2010, it just went down and down and down. And we're going to talk about birth rates and things that caused that. But the fact of the matter is that the population under 18 in the state has not increased since 2010 and will not increase until at least 2030. According to these are official state demographer numbers. This isn't Rick says. This is, what we're actually looking at. And so, again, the real problem has been for the districts in particular is that the pot has been fixed. And so as we introduce and nurture choice, whatever kind of choice that is, whether it's charters or vouchers or whatever it is, it means it comes out of the pot that was the districts. And so, and I almost feel like If we had the growth like we had in the 90s in the population under 18, you wouldn't be sweating this as much as you are now. You're sweating it because we're taking the same pile of the pie and we're cutting it into more pieces. And so your piece is smaller. So it's a pretty easy concept, but it's a very important one, and particularly in districts that are built out. You know, you don't have a lot of new housing to add, and of course, the housing you are added, we'll get to that, is, you know, basically not affordable for most families. And actually not designed or marketed to families either, for the most part. So those things kind of go hand in hand. Looking at the distribution of that growth that we are going to see, according to the state demographer, in the population under 18, going from 1.6 million in 2020 to about 1.9 million by 2050. And we are starting to see the slack come out of the rope. The 2024 total number of births in the state of Arizona did not fall. I won't say it increased because it was such a small, but it was the first time since 2006 it didn't go down. So we're starting to get to where we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so we really could get some of this growth that he's projecting. The map kind of illustrates, and I know it's kind of hard to read, but of that 300,000 or so, 270,000 growth, about a half of that, about 130,000, will be in Maricopa County, which is not as surprising as the fact that over 100,000 of it will be in Pinal County. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest one right now, we work for Maricopa, Casa Grande, and all those districts, is that you can buy a house for $300,000 or $325,000 or $350,000, but some number that at least, you know, people with decent jobs and maybe two incomes can actually afford. And so that's really the places where we're seeing the young families, you know, what there is demand for migrating to. So some of the other surprises for me in this was that, you know, generally down in the south, including Yuma County and Pima County, you got some kind of growth going on. But you look up at north, up in Coconino County, and almost in Yavapai, very, very little change in Yavapai, and you see those older populations and retirees just kind of taking over the scene in a lot of those communities. Yes.
Sorry. So for Maricopa County, are we mostly going to see the growth in the western suburbs?
By and large, inside Maricopa County, it's going to have to be, because as you know, the Southeast Valley is now pretty much completely built out.
And then Pinal, I assume it's Santan Valley and Casa Grande predominantly that.
It's really Santan Valley, yes. As you all saw, it was incorporated a couple of weeks ago. It was incorporated as the largest city in its county. I don't know if that's ever happened before, where a new city turned out to be the biggest city in the county. But it was over 100,000 people. And it's Maricopa. Maricopa has really outdistanced Casa Grande, especially in the last 10 years. Casa Grande, I don't know if it's just a little too far or a little too not like the suburbs that we're all used to living in. You go to Maricopa now, and you could be in Chandler, and you really can't tell the difference. And,
so it's not built out yet, as far as you can tell, Maricopa.
Maricopa, oh no.
Okay.
Oh no, we've got tens of thousands of more houses to build in Maricopa. So we're opening I'm doing boundaries right now for a new K-8 school that they're opening next year, and they're going to open one the year after that. And then they'll actually kind of be caught up, but they're in the other mode. They're, you know, adding space.
I did, quick comment, Ms. Kazi. I did just learn recently that Buckeye is, by landmass, is the largest city in, I don't know if it's the county or the state, but, so yeah, Buckeye's still got a lot of
It's the largest city in the it's the largest land area city now in the state, even larger than Phoenix.
In the state, wow. Yeah.
But not by much over Phoenix, but it is. Now, up until a few weeks ago, there was vast areas of that didn't have water and didn't have prospect of water. So they're working on that issue, and I don't think it'll cap growth out there, you know, like immediately. But down the road, it's still, You know, I've been looking at the plans for Belmont, the city of the future. I have the same plan for 30 years, and it's still just a desert, you know, so not everything you can draw a plan for actually happens. Yes, and it certainly has become, and that's actually one of the things that's held Casa Grande back, is the water company that they had down there wasn't an assured water supply provider, and so they couldn't guarantee projects. And so for a while, you couldn't get single-family projects approved. You could only get apartments approved because they were commercial. So they didn't fall under the same rules. And so they built a slew of apartments all of a sudden, which with the jobs they're creating down there isn't altogether a bad thing. It's good to have workforce housing. But anyways, I digress. We talk about Arizona birth rates, and here's the chart. Looking back at in 2006, there were just over 40 births per population, per thousand population age 15 to 45 in the state. In that year, there were 102,000 babies born. And I'll just jump ahead. Last year, there were 78,000 babies born in the state of Arizona. So we are down a full third in the number of births, even though the population of the state has increased by almost 1 million people during that same period of time. And so it really happened, though, in these two phases almost. There was the big crash during the Great Recession from 2006 through 2011, where, you know, not only an 18.6% decline in the rate, but an actual 16% decline in the number of births in just like 4 years. And then we had what we call the recovery period from about 2011 through like 2014 or so, where I really thought, a lot of other people thought, the birth rate may go back up, because in American history, that's usually what happens. You have a big dip, and then you get a little baby bump on the other side of it. And the exact opposite happened. People were so traumatized by the Great Recession, came out of it with so much debt, saw their parents not trust their jobs and come out with debt, that they decided they weren't going to have kids. And they certainly weren't going to have them right away. And so the average age of at first birth of the mothers increased by 7 years in the space of 12 years. And so it went from being in the, you know, in the mid to late 20s into the 30s. And in areas like ours that are urban, you know, areas, it's even more acute, really. I mean, you get in the rural areas, you still tend to have younger families, but in the urban areas, no. And it's partially, you know, it's partially the cost of everything, I think, you know, and it's also the expectations, in my opinion. I'm an old man, but I think people expect to come out of school with everything their parents had. And I don't know about you, but I didn't start with everything my parents had. And I think that they're willing to go for that rather than to take the time, you know, to raise a family. Now, I do have 2 sons, and the second one, they put it off as long as they could. He's 41, she's like 38, and they finally decided, oh gosh, you know, the clock is running, and lo and behold, there's baby Aubrey, you know. But he's first child at 40. So it's really an interesting situation. As I said, the total number of births actually did not fall in 2024. And then you can see on this, it actually has a line on here for Pinal County, the dark purplish line. You see it going up. And it's the only county in the state that has an increasing birth rate. And it's directly related to the housing stuff. The other interesting thing about birth rates, at least it's interesting to me, is that if you go back before all of this happened in 2006, Arizona's birth rates were 40% above the national average. And it was even with, as you can see, the national average for a while. But now we're actually trending below the U.S. average. And we're down to, what is it, about, I don't have my 88% or so. So we've gone from being 120% of the U.S. average to 88% of the U.S. average. The only other state that's had this big of a decline, and I just find it interesting, is Utah. They beat us by 0.1% over the whole period, but if you want to call that beating us. But it's very odd that that's the state that had the biggest decline. And they've had a lot of growth in Utah. I don't know if you've been up there. And I think it's sort of diluting the original population of the state, and so that's kind of, I think, why that's basically happening, but I think it's also very interesting. I talked about the impact of housing prices, and if you went back to 1984, in particular, back in the 80s, metropolitan Phoenix was a dirt cheap place to live in terms of a major metropolitan area. And that was one of the things I believe we do, work in economic development too. And I really think that's what made us grow. We could bring in labor. People knew they could get a house they could afford and they could get a job. And so off we go, And as this says, in 1990, the median home price was 2.7 times the median income. Last year it was 5.2 times the median income. And so it's completely out of step. If incomes were gaining 5.2, then fine, everybody's good. But that's not the case. And affordability has become a major issue. And I really think it's going to flatten the growth in the state. So maybe water won't matter at some point. We'll price ourselves out first. But it is a major shift. And, since I got here, it's very dramatic. This shows it in terms of, this is median home price. Now, this is an inflation adjusted. So the 2025 number was actually 240,000. I'm sorry, 450,000 was the actual current dollar number. But in inflation adjusted all the way back to the year 2000, we've had a very dramatic rise. And during the boom in 2006 and 2007, where we joked that we were building houses for people who were building houses. And so the bottom fell out of that, and we had a very significant dive. A lot of people lost their homes, walked away from homes during that particular period, and since then it's just been up and up and up. And then the curious thing to me is, what about COVID caused such an incredible spike? I mean, I guess maybe it was fear. We didn't know if COVID was going to last 1 year or 10. I mean, I still find it interesting that it caused housing prices in particular to spike so much, and that since then they've gone pretty much flat. And so I kind of like to take and forget all the bumps and take 2000 and 2025 and draw the line in between. And I think that's the reasonable level of appreciation. You know what I'm talking about. So I think we're, though, pretty close, back on the curve. The problem is our curve isn't where it used to be. $450,000 median house is awfully difficult for a family to afford. And this kind of demonstrates that too. Some interesting data from Axos and Redfin, where they're saying that the median age of the first home buyer in the U.S. rose to an all-time high of 38 years old. First-time home buyer, 38 average. First-time buyer, 38 years old. Only 11% of Phoenix homeowners are under 35 years old. And these other 2 points were kind of interesting, I suppose, but people that are affording to buy a house are needing help. And, you get it one way or another. But it's disproportionately affecting who's able to buy a house. The down payment is such a big part of it in this market. So that's really hurting, of course, our enrollment numbers. It's almost worse if you look at it in terms of rents. So this is just the breakdown, the distribution of units in the market by price range, starting in 2010 and going through 2024. This is not adjusted for inflation, but nonetheless, in 2010, over 90% of all apartments were under $1,000 a month. And now it's 7% are under $1,000 a month. And the number over 2,000, with all of our luxury, our bent on luxury, everything pretty much in multifamily, has really swelled. If you look at 2020, the proportion that were over $2,000 a month, and just in 1 year, how that just swelled. And I have to feel like people were taken advantage of. And I know that there were a lot of landlords who lost money during COVID, because they weren't able to do evictions and those kinds of things. And so there may have been a little bit of a grab there, to make up for lost time. But it still feels an awful lot like price gouging, no matter how you look at it, especially when you look at our incomes not tracking with that at all. We're seeing it as we do your work and work for other districts, is why I have all these sort of student generation rates I track over time for different districts and different types of housing. And so I pull that from the census public use microdata sample. I won't go into what that is, but I compared to 2018 to 2023. 2023 is the most current data available, and you can see on a unit by unit basis across almost all types of housing units, we're simply getting fewer school-age persons per dwelling unit. And some of the biggest declines have been, if you notice, that multifamily, in that 5 to 9 and the 10 to 19 units per building, where 20% decline in the per unit student generation rate. That's rents. That's just all it is rents. Well, this is a little easier to talk about. Not much more fun, but a little easier. This graph shows total public school enrollment in the state, K-12, going clear back to 2000. The red part of the bar are district students. The blue part of the bar are students enrolled in charter schools. And the green line, which is keyed to the right axis, shows the percentage then in charter schools. And so it was interesting that, through the Great Recession and in a few years afterwards, there was growth in the charters, but it was measured. And then beginning in about 2010, 2011, the charters didn't do well during the Great Recession either. They pulled back on a lot of their construction plans and waited it out. And so what happened afterwards was the stampede. And the stampede was driven not by the mom and pops who were doing it back in 2005. It was driven by Great Hearts Basis, American Leadership Academy, the big corps. It came in and changed what, a charter school was really intended to be, which was an alternative for people who needed an alternative. And we've lost complete sight of that in the name of profit. And so this reflects what we've been saying in terms of the total pot, if you will, of persons being fixed since 2010. Look at this chart. The total number being financed by the state hasn't increased during that entire period of time. The last bar shows that even charter school enrollment fell last year for the very first time ever. Even during the recession, they never had a decline. And that's ESAs. That is it catching up with them. And there's a gentleman whose name escapes me right now, Cardi. A fellow down out in the East Valley who's done some real in-depth analysis of the winners and losers of ESAs. And he's claiming that the charters have taken it much harder than the districts have. And that there's been some, a serious number of closures of charters that he can directly or indirectly link, to the expansion of that program. So it's quite interesting. It's kind of distressing, but it's I guess it's equal opportunity misery. But at least it appears to be stable at the moment. The other thing that's really changed during that same period of time is the distribution of students by grade level. So this is total for the state. If you go clear back to 1990 or 2000, you can see that the high school cohort was much smaller on a per grade level basis than the other cohorts. And in fact, when you have a big boom, what always happens is K2 will come out on top. So you look at there, 2006, 2007, by far the largest group on a per grade basis was K2. That was as big as it ever was. It essentially started getting hit by birth rates not long after that and has wandered around and now, dropped fairly considerably. Remember, charters are public, so it's not charters. So we're talking about demographics for the most part, except for starting in 2022, 2023, 2024, where we went from bouncing around at some level to a definite downward slope. And again, that's ESAs. The program was, targeted, not totally, but kindergarten and first graders were by far the biggest groups that took advantage of that option. So what happens, of course, is these curves chase each other. So what happens in this one happens in this one 3 years later. And so this big decline that we've seen in the 6th through 8th grade group, beginning clear back in 2019, is now caught up to the high schools. And so my high school clients are looking at the kind of losses that you've been dealing with or not you maybe personally, but a lot of elementary districts have been dealing with for 10 years already. And now they're in the thick of it. And for the first time, we have all 4 cohorts, if you will, statewide in decline. We haven't been in that position before. So look to see total public school enrollment decline a little bit over the next few years until it catches up with itself. But if you're in a high school district, you're looking at 7 or 8 more years of declining enrollment. We've been talking about empowerment scholarship accounts indirectly. Here's a little bit of the data. I haven't put 25, I don't have 25, 26 yet. I was thinking of something else. So you can see the program went universal in 2022, 2023. In that year, an additional 19,000 people signed up for the program. The state says that in that year, only 21% of those were attending a public school. So the first ones to take advantage, of course, were the people who were already in a private school. So the first year, 79% were already in a private school, didn't impact you very much. But then you can see the 2 years afterwards, we're talking it's falling to half or less. And so even though the total change in the size of the program, appears to be declining, more of it's coming at the expense of the districts. And so just through last year, we're estimating, based on the change in the percentages the state's provided, that the total impact on public schools has been around 29,000 or so students, just really in the last 2 years. The first year hardly counted very much. So the other thing that's interesting, I don't know if I have it here. Oh, this shows the grade. I'm going to back up. Is that the early growth the kids went to private school, or they were already in a private school. And since then, what we've seen is a tremendous spike in homeschooling. Because the private schools only had so much space. They might build more over time, but it's not going to be quick, and they don't have a lot of money. And so it's been it's all gone towards the homeschooling end of it, which is, I'm not going to say whether it should or shouldn't. I'm just personally very concerned about accountability. I'm concerned about the accountability of how the money is being spent, but I'm even more concerned about whether the kids are being educated, and that there is no standardized testing requirement that I'm aware of for those students.
So is there any discussion, I'm not just beyond demographers, but like beyond that, about how ESAs are being used as an alternative social safety net in those homeschool communities?
I mean, I know it's being used as an income substitute. I mean, there are definitely people who are leaving their jobs. There are also people that have these accounts who aren't spending the money. Because you can get the money put into an account every year. It doesn't mean you have to spend it, and it accumulates. It doesn't just, I assumed if you got an award, you didn't use it, it went back in the kitty. Well, that's not the way it works. And so people are actually going ahead and paying for private school tuition out of pocket and letting money build up in this account. And then when they graduate, their kids will have about $100,000 to put towards college, which they can then legally do. And the reason why people are going, the other reason why people are going homeschooling is that even though a $7,500 value is pretty good, that's about a third of the tuition at a really competitive private school. And even with a subsidy, say from a faith organization, some people get tuition, what am I trying to say, scholarships towards those. It still isn't going to pay the full bill. So it still requires people to have money to use it in that way. Whereas the homeschooling, it just worries me more because there's even less attention to where to what's happening for the kids. That's my biggest concern. We talked about the grade profile breakdown. This just shows the last 2 years, 23-24 and 24-25. The shining or the silver lining here may be that we had relatively small increases in the K and the first grade groups last year. However, the students in first grade continued and expanded into second grade, and so we saw, growth in pretty much all of the other cohorts. And this kind of stuff is so new that I have difficulty interpreting it and incorporating it into what I try to do for all of you because I don't have a lot of great data, and I don't have any idea if this is going to be capped at some point, or is it just going to reach saturation? And it may very well just reach saturation.
I would add that as Rick will look at the data and we'll see what he sees, but we saw as the cohort movement from last year to this year, the losses occurred in second grade, third grade, and fourth grade. And then you look at this graph and you kind of say, oh, maybe there's some connection there.
Yeah, I'll be anxious to get the data for this year in here. They haven't released the Q1 FY26 reports yet. So this is my slide, and it's how I have to do my job, and it's what makes Scott's job and my job so difficult. To be quite honest, is that we start off with whatever your school age population of your district is. It is. It might be going up, it might be going down, but we choose to divide those up. So some fraction of that population leaves for other providers. Now, you're one of the districts that has one of the highest rates, actually, of people who leave. Fortunately, you also have the highest rate of anybody I know of bringing people back in, so it all works out. But from a planning perspective, I'm looking at who's in my community, and then all of a sudden, half of them are gone. And then we have these things called attendance areas. And so if I'm trying to project enrollment at a school, I overlay attendance areas on it. So that gives me an idea how many kids are in each attendance area that are actually attending one of your schools. And then we have this thing called in-district open enrollment, where even if you're in the district, you choose to go to this school and not that one and this other one. And that is fluid and changes every year. And I understand it's limited and controlled and very well managed. But the fact of the matter is that it introduces another layer of error in trying to do a projection by school. And then the final component we deal with at the school level is kids choosing to come into the district. And so for you, the amount going out and the amount coming in, it adds a sort of a special level of complexity to the entire thing. But in a lot of districts, the service rate, the share of their own students, resident students they are serving, has fallen below 60% in most of the districts I work in. So there is a tremendous amount of this movement. And it's kind of frustrating for me because I'm at heart kind of a scientist. And everything we try to do is based in scientific theory or economic theory somehow. And then along comes choice, and there's no way for me to be at everyone's dinner table to know what they're deciding to do next year. And so that's where, I'm not trying to defend myself, but that's where a lot of our error and where a lot of probably Scott's error comes from too, is you just never know who's going to show up next year. And it's just taking the science kind of right out of it in some ways. So that's my story for tonight. We'll definitely have more information about you guys going forward, but I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Rick. Are there any other questions from board members? Go ahead, Scott.
I do. Has there been any analysis of the income level in the public schools, that whether the impact of the ESAs has changed the mix from an economic standpoint?
I haven't seen any data that would be available yet to really support that. I did see an analysis that was done. The state is issuing a report that shows you the number of people who have an ESA by zip code. And you can correlate zip codes with incomes. And so if you look at that map, it becomes pretty obvious that it's concentrated in higher income areas.
So I guess my point was, one of the things that I've always thought was a real strength in Madison was the mix, both the ethnic mix and the income mix, because I think that helped both at both ends, particularly from a social side. And the fact that, if it's that, changing that, I think is a detriment as well.
I would agree.
Other questions? Well, thank you so much for
Thank you very
coming
much for
today.
having me.
Actually,
Oh,
I have one more.
Mr. Holcomb
I
has another
apologize.
question.
It goes back to slide 15. Yeah, because you mentioned this in some, but this is really stark to me in that if you look at, as you said, the next cohort moves on, what we're looking at is, from our standpoint, our focus is on the kindergarten to second grade cohort.
And the third to fifth. And then next, the third to fifth, right?
Yeah, because that's the starting point for the next year. So, I see, and you see that impact in high schools.
Yeah.
I think, while you said high school is going to be, I think we're going to feel the impact more first, if I'm looking at this.
Depends on your particular neighborhood. This is, state totals.
Right,
and
but
so
you just not us close. I'm not us Madison. I was thinking us Mellon, in the elementary schools.
sure,
Are going to
absolutely.
feel it actually even more than the high schools at this.
There's
It'll
there's
hit the
still
high
some more
schools.
damage, but I'm kind of comforted a little bit by the fact that the number of births stopped going down. So the pie should stop getting smaller. This isn't demographics. That curve on the back of that blue bar, that's not demographics. That's ESAs, pure and simple. The demographics might be down a little bit, but it's not like that.
Yeah, but I mean that. So the second grade, our third grade, or the overall third grade,
Yeah.
is you're starting at a point that when a few years ago was at 85,000, now it's 75,000.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's your starting point.
It's a
if you
big
don't
difference.
lose another one, you're already 10. That cohort is 10,000 students down.
I was working on Chandler's numbers today. And the thing that struck me most about them is that they have slightly under 2,000 kindergartners and slightly over 4,000 seniors, high school seniors. So if you do nothing but just sit and let it go all the way through the system, you're going to lose. Now, they're still building some houses and there's still, it's some offsets going on, but they lost 1,400 this year. And most of that was kind of guaranteed you were going to lose just because of the move up. So what you're saying is illustrated in spades by that example, because that's how it plays out over time.
Yeah, and when you think about the movement in Mesa over the last 20 years with charter schools and ESAs, or you think about Kyrene now with all the growth in that East Valley for so long, and now they're looking at closing all of those schools. There's a lot of districts who are going through that, and we're a little bit in a more lucky position, but still those falling birth rates are going to impact us.
Partially
and
luck and
choice.
partially it's just being good,
Yeah.
because the reputation matters, especially in an environment of choice, because that's really all people have to hang their hat on in some ways.
And being smaller geographically.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Mr. Holcomb said, it's been a nice mix, and I'm not sure we're going to hang on to that, because what I see is affordable housing being torn down and $1.2 million homes, being built in their place.
Yep.
And it looks good from the street, but in terms of enrollment, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other story that I wanted to really get illustrated this evening, and thank you, Rick, for doing that, is that the pie is getting smaller. Like, you can do everything in the world, but the pie is smaller. So we're all competing, quote unquote, whether you're ESAs, charters, or traditional schools. You're just smaller population of kids.
Yep.
So that's just going to be a reality that we have to contemplate as we make decisions and move forward.
I think the other piece to that too is as you have fewer people having children, you have to change the case about bonds and overrides as well, because there's going to be less people who touch the schools.
There's another double whammy, because you have a declining share of the population who has a child at all, and then you have a declining share of the people who choose your school. And so when you get down to the share of households who have a real stake in the game, I mean, not that we all don't care about education, we certainly do, but to have a child and have them in your school, you're talking 30 or 40% of the households at the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes things like bonds and overrides a real challenge.
Well, thanks, Rick, for your time today. We look forward to your presentation specifically about the district here in a couple months, and we look forward to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda, annual financial report. Dr. Guerin.
President Thompson, Vice President Kazi, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. We're keeping Scott Thompson very busy this evening. It is time for a very important presentation, our annual financial report.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. So, not as entertaining as Rick's presentation, but I'm going to try to make numbers a little bit more interesting. To me, the AFR, the annual financial report, is really the most important report you receive all year financially. It's a lot of interesting things to talk about budgeting, but budgeting is just guessing and hoping and maybe working out. The AFR is actually where we spend our money, and where we spend our money is what we value most. I mean, that is what's most critical, is to look at it in those terms. So this evening we're going to just go through the highlights, because the state forums are a nightmare. I've been on a personal mission down at the legislature a couple times trying to get them changed. I haven't had any luck yet, but maybe try again, because I just think part of the reason people are so confused about public education is these silly forms that don't mean anything other than to the accountants at the Department of Ed and maybe at the federal level. So, in the effort to move along, here are some of the highlights of this year's annual financial report. So what does Madison spend on an annual basis in our operations budget? Just a little over $45 million. The classroom site fund is, interestingly enough, about 10% of that. It's very interesting to me. I don't know why the numbers, when they come out this way, we spend about $4 million, a little over $4 million in capital. We spend a little over $4 million in federal grants. And so the two highlights in that, the largest grants that we had expenditures in was IDEA, which is helping our special ed population, and then the Medicaid reimbursement. And remember that, I'll talk about it again later, but that is money that's come in for services we've already provided, and we have some flexibility in how we can spend it. Overall, we had on page 6, just kind of all the funds, if you throw them together, about 12, almost $13 million. And then again, back to that 4 million number, a little over 4.5 million for food service. I don't know why the numbers kept very consistent, yes. This evening, one of the probably most important slides will be this one. And what carry forward represents, and it's kind of interesting because the recent budget forms that came out, I feel, you know how you feel like your phone's listening to you, and you talk about something with somebody and all of a sudden it shows up on whatever? So I've been talking about, I feel like on the budget forms, we need this separate line item for carry forward, because it kind of gets buried in the number and it doesn't really represent it kind of falsely makes us report a budget that isn't representative of how we think we're going to spend. Well, this year, they finally carved out a line for the carry forward number. So they're listening, yeah, and so I'm kind of pleased about that. But so going forward, what we're looking at, as we finished out last year and kind of moved all our expenses around and cleaned up the books, we ended with just over 1.3 million in carry forward in our M&O. We have quite a large carry forward going forward in capital. That's been a very successful fund for us, doing quite well. But the carry forward in M&O did decrease. If you look down below, the carry forward last year was just under 2 million, which was about 4.1%. We're down to just a little under 3%. There is no perfect number. There is no perfect guidance on what that number should be. When we were prior year funded, we were actually capped that we could only carry forward up to 4%. One of the arguments I made back then and lost was that we should not move to current year funding, because the only thing that is going to cause is for the need for the district to carry forward more than that 4%, because you're now introducing the unknown of the demography of how many kids are going to show up next year, and we have no idea. We can guess as best as we can, and then we see where the chips fall. So I would like to see that number a little larger, and so we're gonna be working on that this year to see how we might get there. I don't want to. What concerns me the most, we are the lowest state in the nation for funding education. Every dollar needs to go to our students to support them. With that, we need some bit of ability to react to what happens when the students don't show up. Just like this year, we're down a few students. Not terrible, certainly not looking at what our neighbors are looking at, but still, we need to have some dollars in our pocket so that if things don't come out the way we projected, we can react to that, because we've made commitments to teachers, we've made commitments to staff for the year. That is the bulk of our budget. That's the commitment we want to maintain. So I only want to hold back enough to make sure that we're good for those kind of bumps and bruises, so that we can have a year to really plan for the next year, which was what, when we were prior year funded, we could do, because we had a year to figure it out. And then they just threw it out with this backpack funding idea that doesn't do anything for anybody and is completely ridiculous. But it is what we live under right now. So we're not in bad shape. We didn't take down our carry forward too far, but certainly we're going to be discussing and looking at throughout this year as we go into budget discussions, budget negotiations. Leadership's already discussing this idea of, where do we need to look at? We have a lot of other challenges coming our way, possibly with federal and state funding as well. So
This is my annual reminder that the state hasn't paid back the rollover for the last 20 years of roughly a quarter of funding for almost all K-12 districts. I think the really small districts got payments back, but for the most part, K-12 districts haven't been paid back that loan that we made to the state 20 years ago. And I'd argue that carry forward also protects us if there is a sharp economic
Something
downturn,
changes.
or if federal funding evaporates 2 weeks before school starts for something important like our like the services we're providing to students with special needs, that carry forward balance is important to make sure that we can provide those in the interim while those issues get resolved.
many of us have already given up talking about it down the line. They just don't want to talk about it.
I will never give up on that.
And we shouldn't. I agree with you. But what's interesting and fascinating is in the meantime, they keep throwing money into the rainy day fund. So they have this 800 to 900, almost $1 billion hole, and they're trying to fill it with a savings account it doesn't make it, it's like saying, well, I've got a credit card for $1,000 and I've got $1,000 in savings. Well, what have you really achieved? You're net zero here. So yes. Other things to note, we are a human resource organization. We are people taking care of little people. And that is the difficulty of education. Number one, because human resources is one of the most challenging part of any business. Ask any business owner what part of the job they don't like, and then they'll tell you it's the human resource part because it's really gray and icky and hard to understand what people are thinking and what motivates them, right? Well, we not only are that HR-driven organization, but we're driven by other HR in our students. So it's what we do. It's where our funds are going. DAA capital, we spent about 1.1 more than last year. We have the funds, as you can see, we have a good balance there. That was mostly refreshing Chromebooks was the primary reason for that increase this year, or last year. Federal and state grants were down about $1 million. ESSER went away in '24, so you can imagine in '25 we didn't have ESSER expenses, so that was the major kind of shift in the state and federal grant funding. And then on page 5, you'll see a lot of negative balances because all the federal and state grants run in the negative for reimbursement base. So a lot of times we end the year with no cash because we're waiting on, we've sent them the bill, they haven't sent us the money yet. Oh, I got cut off. So basically, the major funding sources, as you look at our budget overall, most of it's M&O, 77%. Then you have kind of the classroom site fund, capital, and grants, again, in that little over 4 million grouped other funds. How we spend the funds by program, basically 75% is regular education. Special education at 18.6 is kind of interesting. I haven't looked at the data for Madison, but I can tell you most districts are trending up in that percentage. There's a lot of speculation as to why, and a lot of it has to do with the possibility of ESA's choice and where the students can get their services. The interesting part is that if you go over 20%, you pretty much guaranteed an audit of your special ed spending from this federal level. Maybe that happens nowadays. Maybe that doesn't. I don't know. There's no state, federal Department of Education left to do it, but we'll see. But it's a number that we look at to say, once you get to 20%, that's a very high number, basically. And so we're encroaching on that at 18.6. Yes.
So I know this is relatively new, but like 5 years ago, do we have any idea of what that number looked like?
No, but I will
Okay, I'd be
take that
interested
under
in what
note
the
and look
trend
into
line
that.
is,
That's
yeah.
some of the trending that I would like to get to. I haven't gotten
Okay.
to, but yeah, looking backwards. Unfortunately, it's not our accounting system does not allow an easy multi-year look. It is very year-to-year specific, so you kind of have to sit there and open up each year and dig into the numbers. But those are some of the things I'd like to look further into as after I get past month 4. Okay. But yes.
Oh my gosh, is it really that? I feel like
4 months, yes. I've only been here 4 months. Well, 3.5, really, so. Wow, I don't know what, the slides are just a little out of whack here, but okay. So basically, the next part is on the fund balance report. I'm sure Lori discussed this a little bit with you in the slides I saw from the past. It's kind of a newish report. It was introduced just a few years ago. It follows an accounting practice recommended by GADSB, which is just an acronym for accountants who care about accounting. And basically, it is kind of this summary story around our funds. And when I first saw this hit, I was very concerned when I was with Mesa, and I remain concerned that this is a moment where I need to educate both the governing board and the public that fund balance does not mean cash, and fund balance does not necessarily mean reserved funds to be used any way you'd like. Fund balance is just literally what's on the books on June 30th. The report is a summary of over 30 funds for us. So, I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts in there. And many of the funds have restrictions. What do I mean by restrictions? Well, First, you have supplanting. A lot of the laws in Arizona have a supplanting clause when it comes to education. What does that mean? It means, so take the classroom site fund. I can't take the classroom site fund and spend it on something I've been spending in the operations budget for years. So you can't offset or supplant that funding. You have to add to that funding. That can become a very challenging discussion, and financially making sure that you're calculating that correct, because think of as you decline in students, the pie gets smaller. You're going to spend less in the classroom site fund because there's just less students generating the funds. But at the same time, so will the M&O budget be declined. So then you have to kind of shift to maybe a per student count or something like that. So supplanting is a challenge, but it's kind of a simple, you got to demonstrate that you're spending more and you didn't supplant with the money. Maintenance of effort is more of a federal term. It's very similar. It just has a little bit more of a nuance to it, as it says. It's more of a generally showing that you're maintaining that level of local commitment while you're using the federal funds. But those are restrictions that we live under. So when people say, well, why don't you just take that pot of money and put it over there? We can't. The law might say so. This one is, it just doesn't have the hit with all this wacky whatever's displaying strange here. Is this PowerPoint that's doing it this way, or is this the same thing? I don't know. It was fine when I sent it. I don't know. Sorry, guys. The point to this is that all of these funds have ARS, I'm not retired.
Statutes.
ARS references. So you have restrictions on so many of the things that you know, and it's a little insane, some of the things we have. Let's talk about, the textbook. Why do we need a textbook fund or a litigation recovery fund or, a teacherage fund? Like these are just like we have, I can't verify this, but I do believe Arizona school finance has more funds identified in law than any state. And I've never been able to talk to anybody in another state that has this many funds. And it's a little crazy. And so that's where we end up with these little pots of money with these law restrictions on them. And then they end up in this fund balance report. And people might say, well, you got all the gobs of money over there. Well, I can't spend the litigation recovery money on anything but legal lawyer expenses. It's very specific as to what you can do with it. So you can get the money in if you win a lawsuit, and then the only thing you can spend the money on is another lawsuit. That doesn't make any sense. But that's basically the way it works. We've been trying to get that one changed, by the way.
That's the lawyer's lobby. I mean,
So, why might you have some reserve funds? Well, you have current year funding, as I mentioned, you have economic impact, stability, fiscal responsibility, and we're now looking at the possibility of federal cuts. So reserve funds, to me, are about just making sure that we're ready for what's next, not withholding money, because I don't want to do that. I got to give a big shout out for a minute. The little eyeball in the slide is a AI generated icon. I said, hey, give me something that shows a monitor concept in yellow, and it gave me that. I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't know what it is exactly, but I was having a little fun with AI that day. But what I'm trying to do with those icons is just demonstrate to you that these are the cash funds that you have as a board the most control over. They still have, as the classroom site fund, it has very specific, what we call buckets of things that it can be spent on. But you do have some ability to say, I want to spend it this way or that way within that. And so the highlighted funds we're about to go through are really the ones that are really in your purview. Some folks refer to them as cash controlled. I think that's a little misleading. Some of them actually do have a formula, like the classroom site fund. But basically, we have about a $5 million ending balance in there. Very similar to last year, if you see that we had a 4.7. We're anticipating getting about 5.2 in revenue. We're anticipating spending about 5.8. So we may draw down that balance a little bit. And that's the thing we have to watch with these accounts is, are we on a trajectory down or are we a trajectory up? So they're currently focused on teacher pay. They're going to remain teacher pay. I would just put it in the monitor section. There's nothing wrong with this fund, nothing to be concerned about, but we should keep our eye on it because we don't want to see that balance go too low because it affects both base pay for teachers and performance pay. The Instructional Improvement Fund comes from gaming revenue. It has just under $1 million ending balance. We're estimating $400,000 in revenue. This can't even be the right thing because I know that zero was back on there anyway. I worked so hard to get all these slides fixed, and they basically looking about $300,000 in expenditures. Again, teacher pay. The balance has gone up a little bit since '24. We're doing fine. Nothing to be concerned about. Medicaid is basically, as I stated earlier, we provide services to children that are Medicaid eligible. Those then get submitted to the federal government. We receive a check based on the offset of the cost of that service. With that, we have pretty wide discretion on how we might spend that money. And right now, 1.8 million in balance. Revenues and expenditures are expected to be about the same throughout this year. We've been using it mostly for guidance services and some other operating expenses, and we're just going to continue to monitor. There's not anything to worry about. It's not growing. It's not declining.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Go ahead.
So even with the recent federal legislation, you still believe that those estimated revenues are correct?
It's interesting. So far, Medicaid reimbursement program hasn't been on their radar for cuts. It's more been in the titles, Title I, Title II, Title IV. That's where we're seeing the biggest. I'm not going to say it's going to stay off the radar, but so far, all the updates we've been receiving, this is not the area they look to be cutting in. And then, the Medicaid changes from, what they are trying to do is shift a lot of Medicaid costs down to the state. But that's a state problem, which ultimately is going to affect education because we're the big kahuna in the budget. But again, it's not necessarily going to take away from. So right now, I don't anticipate a change.
Okay.
Again, we continue to
Because
monitor.
that amount that they're pushing down to states is dramatic. It's a huge
Oh, yes,
nut.
yeah, like it's a budget buster
Yeah.
amount that's coming our way. And the state's not even bringing in enough revenue, basically. We're basically covering what we thought we were going to pay for, but we're not anywhere near having created a balance to cover what is about to come our way. But for whatever reason, this fund has not been on the radar for cuts. It's been a concern since last year. People have been watching it, but I just have not seen anybody say this is where they're going to cut.
Okay.
Yes, I'm hearing the same thing. We've all been very carefully watching it, and it's been
As a follow-up, it may be relevant to this and, other federally reimbursed. Have we had any issues over the last 4 months on delays in reimbursement or anything like that, except for July when we weren't going to get any money?
No, in fact, and I've been monitoring too, as some of the ed sources throughout the states, the money's still been flowing into the states as anticipated, even with the shutdown and everything right now. So
Okay, thank you.
still on the monitoring, could change, as less staff is available to even process things. But at this point, states are receiving the money and districts are getting it after they do.
Okay, thank you.
School plant funding, long-term facility rentals, basically, this is a very healthy fund. We have about 1.3 million in personnel and equipment expenses, some utilities, insurance costs coming out of that. Probably the biggest expense there is our insurance, over $700,000 to the Risk Retention Trust. Very appropriate to use the school plant. This is long-term use of the facilities, so think of like cell towers and things like that. That money might be coming in. This is not we rented the gym for a day or something like that. Again, we'll monitor, but very healthy and in good shape, so no action at this point. The Civic Center is short-term rentals, and it's just under 2 million. We're estimating to spend about 600,000 and receive 600,000. Maybe we'll do better than that as this is everything from renting our schools to renting the theater on that short-term basis. But and we're certainly encourage folks to use our facilities. So maybe we'll be able to do a lot better. But the conservative would be to say it's going to be about the same as it was last year. And the balance last year was 2 million, so it's staying about the same. Yes.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, so we're expecting it to be about the same revenues, but I don't know if you know this yet, but over time, has our facility rentals, like, are we staying steady with our rentals? Or I don't know if people are using our schools as much anymore.
I think we'd have to check with Keisha on that to get a
Yeah,
report
that's
on that.
something that I intend to and continue to look into. My sense is not a lot has changed there so far, but that's just anecdotal.
Yeah, something
But
to
I know
monitor.
we're trying.
And I'm sure there's some impact for at Rose Lane when they used to rent those fields out to soccer. There's no fields right now. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that'll come back.
Yeah, when we
once
take
the
a whole
new
school
facilities are
offline,
done.
it
Yeah,
does
very
affect that.
soon.
So, but then we have other areas like the theater where we're trying to increase rentals, and so maybe we can make up some of that. So it's one of those I'd love to look at it more on a 4 or 5 year basis, and not there yet.
Thank you.
Community schools are what you refer to as community ed most of the time. That's your fees coming in for your programs, and that is very popular and very well supported here. You would think, well, $8 million in expense, and we've only got about $2 million in revenue, but at the same time, if the revenue stopped coming, then the programs wouldn't exist either. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I tend to look at this kind of through the private sector mentality of, there's theories in the private sector about how long would a business continue to last if revenue stopped tomorrow. And so they do these kind of, cash runouts to see, how healthy you are as a private business. And so I think of these funds kind of in the same way. Are they, can we last for a year? Can we last for 2 or 3 years? Most of these ones I'm looking at monitoring, they're somewhere in the 2 to 3 year. If the revenue stopped for whatever reason, this particular fund doesn't concern me, because if the revenue stopped, the program stopped, and everything goes away anyway, so it wouldn't have the expense continuing along. The others might, because they might be committed to staff or other things that we're spending, utilities and insurance and stuff that we need to continue to find a source of that. So then we have indirect costs. This is the money coming in from federal and state grants for administrating the grant. And it basically just recognizes you got to do payroll, you got to do some accounting. You don't write that into the grant. You just get some amount that you can take out of the grant and put towards this. Very flexible, so that we can use it. Right now, we've been using it for both ed services and business services personnel. And again, we're going to keep expenses and revenue about the same, and don't anticipate a lot of changes. This was getting a lot more dollars just a little bit further back because you had COVID increasing the amount that was coming in indirect, but we've returned back to about that $400,000, $500,000 level. So we continue to monitor that one, and that's the AFR. And any questions?
Any questions from the board? Ms. Kazi?
I thought there was some, so indirect funding, usually I've seen around 30%. I don't know what it is in our education grants, but it was my understanding that there were going to be some reductions in that from this current administration. If I did federal level, have you not seen that?
I haven't seen that. I know that it changed with ESSER funds going away. The calculation kind of got adjusted, but I haven't seen anything specifically on will the percentages change from a federal perspective on that? No.
So much, because the universities are getting hit with that. So I'm just curious, yeah.
And we would, and the other part, I guess, indirectly, is that if the title money is cut, then the percentage will be out of a smaller pot and therefore less money coming in. So there is some indirect, impact regardless, but I haven't seen anything on rates specifically at K-12 at this point. Doesn't mean it won't come up.
Yeah. Other questions?
I just have a comment. Mr. Thompson, I want to thank you for this incredible work. It's hard to believe that you've only been here 3 months. And so, I know. And so you've just quickly become such an important part of the team. So I really appreciate all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Okay, last item on the agenda is discussion regarding future meetings. Dr. Guerin.
President Thompson, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. Again, it is hard to believe that we are already in October. I'm very excited to share that we will start our school showcases next meeting. And so I believe Madison Park is up first. I will also be sharing my superintendent goals with you soon, and we will have an executive session related to that on October 28th, but you'll see those ahead of time. We will have a bond and override report for Mr. Thompson, and we are so excited to bring you the next round of board policies. Woo-hoo. And I believe Mr. Thompson's the winner this time with the most policies, which is kind of an upset because normally Ms. Marshall has the most policies. So we will also have my goals as an action item at that meeting. And then we will be up in November. November, we will have another executive session. This will be a chance for you to give some input before we begin budget advisory and interest-based negotiations. And this year, Cabinet has already jumped in working on budget. So we're going to really lean in on our tried and true processes for our financial work, but knowing that it is a different landscape now. We will also have our student achievement state assessment update. We should have letter grades public by then and have achievement results. So that is always a very popular presentation by Mr. Pienkowski, and we will have some more first reads for policies. I plan to also have a public presentation for my superintendent goals at that other meeting.
Great. Any comments,
So
questions for Dr.
do we
Guerin?
do we have 2 meetings in November?
I think we have one.
I wasn't sure because
one.
of Thanksgiving.
One in November, one in December.
Yeah.
One of each. Okay, thank you.
President Thompson,
Yes.
we are actually supposed to vote on the AFR.
Oh,
So
well,
we're gonna
let's
go
go
back.
back and
Oops.
vote on the
Action
AFR.
item.
That's why we have you, to protect us, to make sure we do the things we need to do.
I will admit that it was our IT person that me out.
Otherwise, we'd be back for a special meeting. So, thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the AFR as presented?
I move to approve the AFR.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Gresham, seconded by Mr. Holcomb. Please vote. So mesmerized by the numbers, I forgot to call for the vote. Motion passes unanimously. With that, I don't think we have any further business, right? We're done? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gresham, seconded by Mr. Holcomb. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Meeting is adjourned.
Sign out.
Yeah, good stuff, for sure. Yeah, always.
Oh, good night, Irene.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
You, yep.